Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord and joined by Mark Zinno. Yesterday, Mark Zinno, you were at the press conference for Terry Fontenot where it was a lot of words. It actually, it was shocking. It wasn't the typical a lot of words, no answers. It was a very short, I just didn't do a good enough job to a lot. So it was a shorter, no answered blanket remark. What were your biggest takeaways, though, from what Terry Fontenot said yesterday?
I guess, and I put this on Twitter. My biggest reaction was to, them being, quote, comfortable with Kirk Cousins and a $40 million cap hit on the bench, providing absolutely zero production. Again, I think he was speaking more to, I think that was a lot of posturing for other GMs and other NFL teams, letting everybody know, like, hey, we're not cutting Kirk. Because I asked him specifically if there's any truth to that report. He said, no, there was no truth to the report that they're going to cut Kirk Cousins. So they are keeping him. And what they are saying here is that please make us an offer because we'll give him to you, but we're not going to give him to you for free. And now begins, sort of the Mexican standoff, if you will, of how long teams are willing to wait out the Falcons for it. And look, teams know the other thing is that Kirk is going to have diminished value because he's going to get a post-June 1st trade designation, which means technically teams can't talk to him, can't bring him into the facility, can't get him any information until after June 1st. It is Kirk Cousins, so he's a veteran, so it shouldn't take that long to get up to speed depending on the team. But again, that diminishes his value in the trade market. So are the Falcons willing to let Kirk Cousins go for a fourth-round pick, a conditional fourth-rounder, and say, see ya, and get rid of him and save a whole bunch of money on the cap? Again, as I've said repeatedly, I don't think Kirk Cousins is on this roster next year. I don't think he wants to be a backup. I think he told everybody, hey, I didn't forget how to play football. I still can play. I think that he wants to go play, more football, and ultimately he won't be here. However, I will add this much, and you guys know this as well as I do. If it's one thing the Falcons organization does really well, it's double down on bad decisions. And if Kirk Cousins is a bad decision right now, the idea that they're going to keep him and not trade him, even for a minimal return, is doubling down on a bad decision.
I think everybody assuming that the logical path is going to be followed is crazy to do with this organization. I don't know how many times you have to watch somebody do something dumb for you to start believing they're going to continue to do something dumb. I am not convinced they're going to do the right thing. Now, I still would put my money on, him getting cut. I did present I do think there's a slight chance they are able to trade him. And that is, hey, Kirk, you're either on this roster or we're going to trade you. There is no in between. We are not going to cut you. We're going to basically eat that extra $10 million March 17th bonus, whatever it is. I think there's a very, very slim chance where he goes, I'm in the twilight years of my career. I will waive my no trade clause just to play. That is the only way I see the Falcons trading him. Maybe they just swallow their pride, which they should. They should just swallow a difficult pill and cut him. I mean, there's no real benefit to keeping him. He also doesn't I think everybody is also overlooking the fact that he's a bad backup in every sense of the word, other than that he can provide ample experience for Michael Penix. He can't run the offense. We're going to run a completely different offense. Like Michael Penix, his talent takes this offense to heights that Kirk Cousins' arm has never been able to do. Like, the whole point of a backup is to have a guy who can seamlessly replace the start, not seamlessly, but be able to at least run the offense as is. Kirk Cousins can't run Michael Penix offense. That's something everyone's overlooking.
I want to ask you, Mark, you think so? I mean, you mentioned that he could be traded. I'm of the belief that there's no trade situation out there that makes any sense for all parties. Like they said, all parties have to be aligned.
There's one.
There is one, right? And I think Alex talked about it yesterday. Like, it's like,
what was it? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of curious.
He was just saying, if he's desperate enough to play, and there's a situation, a team that's desperate enough to need Kirk Cousins. There's one team that comes to mind. We didn't even get into teams, but the Cleveland Browns with Kevin Stefanski.
That's not what I had in mind.
It's not even about the team. It's just about the scenario. The scenario of where Kirk Cousins doesn't want the money more than he wants to play in the twilight years of his career.
If the
Falcons are going to dig in.
One, the Falcons are going to be eating some of that salary, regardless of the cap ramifications. The Falcons are going to be eating some of that. Nobody's taking that on at this age. But let me give you a scenario that is quite the fit and makes a ton of sense. And that is, and hear me out here, the San Francisco 49ers. If Brock Purdy wants to overplay his hand here and wants more money than the Niners are willing to let him go, they may say, go ahead, go. They will get Kirk Cousins on a relatively cheap deal with a playoff-ready team and a coach, oh, by the way, who he had in Washington when he first started, in a system he knows. That is probably the best fit I can think of. If Brock Purdy overplays his hand and wants $60 million and wants the highest contract that's next up, and San Fran's like, nope, we'll take a $30 million cap hit the next 2 years with Kirk Cousins, and we'll let him play for the next 2 years on a very veteran team that's ready to go to the playoffs.
I got another one along those same lines, and it's Minnesota with Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
You know, Darnold, the way he looked against the Lions, we talked about this yesterday. I mean, he looked like a totally different guy. I mean, he looked abysmal. It was the I'm seeing ghosts Sam Darnold that we saw. I mean, guys were open, especially on those fourth down plays, both of them. Jordan Addison in the corner, Naylor on a slant route, and he looked off of them. Like it was really abysmal quarterback play from Darnold, and we'll see what he does in the playoffs if he bounces back. But that's going to be an interesting conversation with the Vikings this offseason if he has another bad playoff game where some other team might come in and be like, oh, we'll just look at the first 17 weeks and give you 40 mil. The Vikings pass, JJ McCarthy, Kirk Cousins, like that one's interesting too.
I think the overall theme of this entire conversation should basically be what it's been for the entirety of the NFL's history is there's never enough good quarterbacks than there are teams who need them. And Kirk Cousins, while he is obviously not what he once was, I find it very hard to believe that he isn't going to be at least a little bit better as he's a year removed further from that Achilles injury. And again, you're only assuming 1 year of guaranteed salary. The rest of that 2 years after you could cut him, a trading team can cut him and wipe their hands clean of him. Like, I think a lot of people are overlooking. This isn't a terrible situation if the Falcons just dig their heels in and they're like, hey, we are literally not going to cut you. So you are going to be a backup, collect your $10 million roster bonus, be happy with your family, or waive your no trade clause.
I genuinely don't think they want to keep him. I think they want him off the roster and they want to move on. But that said, let me bring this back home to something that really is going to stick in Alex's craw here, because
I can't wait to hear it.
It's not very hard to do that.
I know, but still, because it's something you've talked about. How this whole thing with Kirk Cousins goes down will be an ultimate reflection on Terry Fontenot's abilities as a GM to manage this roster and continually make it better. I addressed him specifically about his job security concerns. He said he doesn't think about it. That's fine. And I even caveated, said, Terry, hey, I only asked because you've been here 4 years. You haven't made the playoffs. Like, that's a really slippery slope for any GM to stand. He understood. I was fair with him about it. But the simple point is, you've got nothing to hang your hat on in the draft other than Tyler Algier outside the first round, right?
Yeah, what are we talking? We're dropping running back.
This entire draft class.
The easiest position to draft.
It was a waste. This entire draft class was a waste. They provided nothing to this year's team. So you can't hang your hat on the draft. The only free agent you sign of note is Jesse Bates because Justin Simmons and Matt Judon were ghosts for a better part of the year. So you have nothing, and I mean nothing left to hang your hat on here. The only saving grace you have is that you can get rid of this contract as soon as possible. And that's really the ultimate measure of Terry Fontenot as a GM here.
I just wrote something on the site. Go check it out, sportstalkatl.com, that, we should listen to people when they tell us who they are. And Terry Fontenot said it in the press conference, Arthur Blank. Like, he literally said, I haven't been good enough. 4 losing seasons, and his job is to improve the roster. Now, obviously, he's not the coach. He's not the in-game management, but he is involved in personnel decision-making. That is benching Kirk Cousins. That is when to turn to Michael Penix. And we have improved one game.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to say it too. I do want to go to break because I feel like we have a lot more to talk about. Yeah, we have a lot more to talk about this press conference, and we need to break it up. So let's go to break. We'll continue talking about the Falcons press conference and what Terry Fontenot said yesterday.